When a young soldier's custom rifle draws sneers from her peers, they don't expect her to outshoot them all. You won't believe who steps in to reveal her true strength. The sun was a merciless orb over Fort Bladensburg, a dusty army training post carved into the arid hills outside Alamogordo, New Mexico. Its rays baked the gravel range, where Private First Class Marissa Delgado stood among a ragged line of recruits, her M4 carbine cradled in her arms. At 22, she looked younger, almost fragile, her slight frame swallowed by standard-issue fatigues, her dark hair scraped into a tight bun. Her rifle, though, told a different story. A custom grip, a red dot sight angled just so, a sling rigged in a way that made the others squint. It was a setup that screamed intention, not inexperience. She'd spent years perfecting it, guided by her uncle's voice in her head, a retired Green Beret who'd taught her to shoot on his sprawling El Paso ranch. "It's not the gear, Marissa," he'd said, his eyes crinkling with pride. "It's the hand that holds it." Today, she meant to prove him right. The range was a stark expanse, targets dotting the horizon at 50, 100, 200 meters, their black silhouettes shimmering in the heat. The air carried the bite of gunpowder and the faint sweetness of sagebrush, mingling with the distant thrum of a black hawk slicing through the sky. Marissa adjusted her stance, boots grinding into the dirt, her fingers brushing the grip she'd chosen for its balance. She was here to qualify, to carve her place in a world that didn't always welcome women like her. Quiet, determined, and underestimated. But the glances from her fellow recruits told her she'd already been judged. Her rifle, her pride, was their punchline. "Delgado, what's that mess on your M4? The voice belonged to Private Travis Haskins, a hulking recruit from Tulsa with a smirk that could curdle milk. He leaned on his own rifle, standard and untouched, his eyes glinting with mockery. "Looks like you bedazzled it at a craft fair." A ripple of laughter spread through the line, sharp, mean, the kind that cuts deeper than it should. Private Jared Polk, a wiry kid from Boise with a chip on his shoulder, joined in. "Yeah, that sight's gonna blind you before you hit anything. You compensating for something, Delgado?" Marissa's cheeks burned, but she kept her eyes on the target ahead, her jaw tight. She'd heard it all before. Her setup was extra, not regulation, a rookie mistake. But every piece was deliberate, tested over countless hours at her uncle's range, where she'd learned to shoot tighter groups than most of these loudmouths could dream of. She wasn't here to show off. She was here to survive. "Focus on your own lane, Haskins," she said, her voice low, barely audible over the clatter of gear. The laughter didn't stop, but it didn't matter. The range would answer for her. Sergeant First Class Nathaniel Brooks, a weathered man with a scar like a lightning bolt down his cheek, strode along the line, his boots kicking up clouds of dust. 20 years in the Army had given him a voice that could silence a storm. "Eyes front, mouths shut," he barked, his gaze sweeping over the recruits. When it landed on Marissa, he paused, his eyes lingering on her rifle. She braced for a reprimand. Her setup wasn't standard, and she knew it could draw fire from a by-the-book instructor. But Brooks only gave a faint nod, almost invisible, before moving on. It was enough to make her heart stutter. What did he see? 50 meters, prone position." Brooks' command snapped the recruits into motion. Marissa dropped to the ground, her movements smooth despite the knot in her stomach. The gravel bit into her elbows as she settled her cheek against the stock, her red dot sight framing the target with crisp clarity. She exhaled, slow and steady, her finger resting lightly on the trigger. The world narrowed, dust, heat, and jeers fading until it was just her, the rifle, and the silhouette 50 meters away. The first shots cracked through the air, a chaotic symphony of pops and pings. Marissa fired, each round a quiet defiance, the recoil a familiar pulse against her shoulder. She didn't rush, didn't flinch, even as Haskins's voice carried from a few lanes over. "Bet she's spraying and praying," he muttered to Polk, who snickered. Marissa ignored them, her focus unbreakable, each shot a step toward proving them wrong. When the ceasefire came, Brooks and his assistants fanned out to check the targets. Marissa stood, brushing dirt from her knees, her pulse hammering as she waited. She couldn't see her target from here, and the uncertainty gnawed at her. Had her setup held up? Had she overreached, like they said? The other recruits milled about, some crowing about their scores, others cursing under their breath. Haskins strutted back from his lane, grinning at Polk. "Nailed it," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Brooks reached Marissa's target, his clipboard in hand. He studied the paper silhouette, its center torn by tight clusters of holes, and scribbled a note. Without a word, he moved to the next lane. Marissa's stomach twisted. His silence felt like a verdict, and not a good one. She glanced at her rifle, second-guessing the grip, the sight, the sling. Maybe they were right. Maybe she'd been foolish to think she could stand out. "Delgado," Brooks called, his tone flat. 40 out of 40, expert. The words hit like a shockwave, and Marissa's breath caught. Expert. The highest score, every shot dead center. A murmur rippled through the recruits, and Haskins's smirk vanished. Polk crossed his arms, his jaw tight, muttering something she couldn't hear. Marissa stood a little straighter, but the victory tasted bittersweet. She'd proven herself, but the weight of their doubt still hung in the air. As the recruits reset for the 100-meter shoot, Polk leaned toward another recruit, Devin Walsh, a lanky kid from Reno. "She's got to be cheating," Polk said, his voice carrying. "No way a girl like her shoots like that with that junk." Walsh laughed, and Marissa's hands clenched around her rifle. She wanted to scream, to tell them about the summers spent training, the calluses on her hands, the night studying ballistics with her uncle. But she swallowed it, her silence louder than their words. You won't believe who stands up for her when the odds stack higher. This is just the start. The real fight is coming. The second week at Fort Bladensburg was a crucible, each day hotter and harder than the last. The recruits were deep into advanced rifle marksmanship, and the range had become a proving ground for egos as much as skill. Marissa had kept her scores high, her focus razor-sharp, but the whispers about her rifle hadn't faded. They'd grown sharper, more personal, coalescing into a nickname that followed her like a bad smell. Gear Tickler. Haskins and Polk had coined it, and half the platoon had picked it up, their laughter a constant jab at her pride. She bore it quietly, her uncle's words echoing in her mind. "Let the rifle talk, Marissa. It's louder than any fool's mouth." Today's drill was a timed stress shoot, a beast of a test that pushed recruits to their limits. Paired off, they'd sprint 50 meters in full gear, drop to firing positions, and engage targets at varying distances, while instructors shouted and timers ticked. The sun was a furnace, sweat stinging Marissa's eyes as she stood beside her partner, Private Lena Carver, a soft-spoken recruit from Savannah with a steady hand and a quiet strength. They didn't talk much, but Marissa felt a kinship with her, a shared understanding in their silence. The range was alive with tension, the air thick with dust and anticipation. Marissa and Lena lined up, their rifles at the ready, while Haskins and Polk took their positions 2 lanes over. "Gear Tickler's gonna choke," Haskins called, his voice dripping with glee. "That sling's gonna tangle her up before she fires a shot." Polk mimicked her grip, exaggerating it into a clumsy parody, and a few recruits laughed. Marissa's jaw tightened, but she kept her eyes on the course, her fingers brushing the familiar contours of her rifle. She wasn't here for their approval. She was here to endure. Brooks' whistle pierced the air, and Marissa and Lena took off, their boots pounding the uneven dirt. The sprint was brutal, 30 pounds of gear dragging at her shoulders, the ground treacherous underfoot. Marissa reached her firing position first, dropping to a knee and snapping her rifle up. Her red dot sight locked onto the target, the world shrinking to that single point of focus. She fired, her shots crisp and deliberate, each one a defiance of the voices that doubted her. Lena was right behind, her own rounds finding their mark with precision. The ceasefire came too soon, and Marissa's chest heaved as she lowered her rifle. Her target was a constellation of red holes, another near-perfect score. Lena's was close, and they exchanged a quick nod, a silent acknowledgement of their teamwork. But before they could catch their breath, Haskins's voice cut through the haze. "Hey, Delgado, you slipping the range crew some cash to fix your scores?" He stood with his hands on his hips, his rifle slung carelessly, his grin daring her to respond. Polk piled on, his voice louder now. "No way you're out shooting us with that scrapyard special." The accusation hit like a slap, raw and personal. Marissa had taken their jabs for weeks, let them slide like water off her back. But this claim that her skill was bought, that her hours of sweat and discipline were a lie, was too much. Her hands trembled, not with fear but with a quiet fury she'd kept buried. She turned to face them, her rifle still in her grip, her voice steady but sharp. "I shoot what I shoot. Maybe if you spent less time running your mouth, you'd hit something worth talking about." The range fell silent, the air heavy with shock. Even Haskins blinked, caught off guard by her fire. The other recruits stared, some smirking, others wide-eyed. Marissa's heart pounded. She hadn't meant to draw a line in the sand, hadn't wanted to make herself a target. But there it was, and she wouldn't back down. Haskins recovered, his face reddening. "Oh, you're tough now. Let's see it, Gear Tickler. 1-on-1, you and me. Your junk rifle against mine." The challenge hung in the air, reckless and dangerous. Marissa's mind raced. She could outshoot him, she knew it. But this wasn't her way. She'd come to Fort Bladensburg to prove herself to the Army, not to some loudmouth recruit. Still, the platoon was watching, their eyes boring into her, waiting for her to fold or fight. Backing down would only cement their doubts, make her the girl who couldn't hack it. Before she could answer, Brooks stepped between them, his presence like a storm rolling in. "Enough," he growled, his scar catching the sunlight. "You want to play games, Haskins? Fine. Delgado, you're in too. Urban combat sim, tomorrow at dawn. 2-man teams live fire. Pick your partners and prove it, or shut up." His eyes flicked to Marissa, unreadable but steady. "Dismissed." The platoon erupted in whispers, the air buzzing with anticipation. Marissa glanced at Lena, who gave a small nod. They were a team, no question. Haskins slapped Polk on the back, his grin returning. "We're gonna smoke 'em," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Marissa didn't respond, her focus already shifting to the challenge ahead. The urban sim was no game. Mock buildings, pop-up targets, and simunition that stung like a hornet. It was a test of everything she'd trained for. As the recruits dispersed, Marissa stayed behind, cleaning her rifle with care. The custom grip felt like an extension of her hand, the sling a lifeline her uncle had taught her to trust. She wasn't here to win a popularity contest. She was here to honor a promise, to carry a legacy. But now, with the sim looming, she felt the weight of every doubt, every sneer. Brooks approached, his boots crunching softly. He didn't look at her, just stared out at the fading light. "That setup of yours," he said, his voice low. "Most would have ditched it by now. But I've seen it before. Only Vipers train like that." He walked away, leaving her with a name that echoed in her mind. Viper Company, an elite unit her uncle had served in, a shadow she'd never thought to chase. What happens in the sim will turn everything upside down. You won't see it coming, but it's the moment justice starts to take shape. The urban combat simulation range was a labyrinth of plywood shacks, rusted containers, and sandbagged walls, a mock city built to break recruits. Dawn painted the sky in streaks of orange and gray, the air cool but heavy with the promise of heat. Marissa and Lena stood at the starting line, their rifles loaded with simunition, paint rounds that left welts and egos bruised. Across from them, Haskins and Polk adjusted their gear, their laughter carrying like a challenge. The rest of the platoon gathered behind a barrier, their murmurs a low hum of anticipation. Marissa's pulse thrummed, but her hands were steady, her rifle a familiar weight. Brooks stood at the center, stopwatch in one hand, clipboard in the other. "2 teams," he said, his voice cutting through the morning chill. "Clear the course. Hit every target, no friendly fire. Fastest time with the most hits wins. Delgado, Carver, lane 1. Haskins, Polk, lane 2. On my signal." Marissa met Lena's eyes, a silent pact between them. They'd planned late into the night, mapping the course, drilling their signals. This wasn't just about shooting. It was about trust, movement, survival. The whistle blew, and Marissa took point, sprinting into lane 1 with Lena close behind. They stacked up against the first building, a crumbling plywood structure with dark windows. Marissa's red dot sight glowed faintly, her custom grip steadying her hands as she signaled Lena. They moved in, clearing corners with precision, their boots soft on the dirt floor. Pop-up targets sprang from doorways and shadows. Hostiles, civilians, traps. And Marissa fired, her round splashing red paint with deadly accuracy. Lena covered her own shots tight and controlled. They were a unit, seamless despite the chaos. From lane 2, Haskins and Polk's shouts echoed, their bravado louder than their strategy. Marissa tuned them out, her world narrowing to the next room, the next target. Her sling let her shift positions without losing control, a trick her uncle had drilled into her until it was muscle memory. The course was relentless, narrow alleys, sudden ambushes, targets that moved on tracks. But Marissa was in her element, her training a shield against the pressure. Then it happened. Halfway through, Lena caught her foot on a loose board, her ankle twisting with a sharp gasp. She hit the ground, and Marissa dropped beside her, scanning for targets. "You good?" she whispered, her voice tight with concern. Lena's face was pale, but she nodded. "I can limp," she said, grimacing. Marissa helped her up, supporting her weight as they pushed forward. Time was slipping away, and Haskins's voice carried from the other lane. "Gear tickler's done for," he shouted, his laughter grating. Polk joined in, their taunts a blade in Marissa's side. She ignored them, half carrying Lena to the next checkpoint. They reached a 2-story building, the final hurdle, its windows bristling with targets. Lena leaned against a wall, her rifle raised. "I'll cover you," she said, her voice strained but firm. Marissa hesitated. Leaving Lena felt wrong, but they couldn't finish together. "Go," Lena urged. Marissa nodded, climbing the stairs alone, her rifle sweeping each corner. The targets were brutal, popping up faster, some darting left or right. Her sight tracked them effortlessly, her rounds painting each one red. She was a machine, every shot a testament to the years she'd spent preparing. She emerged to find Lena waiting, her face set with determination. They crossed the finish line together, Marissa's arm around Lena's waist, their gear clattering. Brooks called time, and the platoon went quiet, the air thick with expectation. Haskins and Polk finished seconds later, their high fives loud and smug. Marissa's chest tightened. She'd given everything. But had it been enough? Brooks and his assistants tallied the scores, moving from target to target. The wait was endless, the platoon's eyes darting between the teams. Finally, Brooks stepped forward, his face a mask. "Haskins, Polk, 32 hits, 4 misses. Time, 6 minutes, 12 seconds. Haskins grinned, but Brooks wasn't finished. "Delgado, Carver, 38 hits, 2 misses. Time, 6 minutes, 8 seconds. A ripple of shock ran through the crowd. Marissa exhaled, relief flooding her. They'd won, despite Lena's injury, despite the odds. Haskins's grin vanished, and Polk muttered something bitter. But Brooks raised a hand, holding up Marissa's target, its center obliterated by red paint. "This," he said, his voice carrying, "is what discipline looks like. Delgado's setup isn't standard, it's exceptional. I've seen it before, in Viper Company. Only the best train like that." The platoon froze. Viper Company was a legend, an elite unit whispered about in awe. Marissa's heart stopped. She'd never spoken of her uncle, never hinted at her connection. How did Brooks know? Before anyone could speak, a figure appeared at the range's edge, a tall man in civilian clothes, his posture unmistakably military. Marissa's breath caught. It was her uncle, Marcus Delgado, retired staff sergeant of Viper Company, his face weathered but proud. "Private Delgado," Marcus said, his voice calm but resonant. "You made us proud." He stepped beside Brooks, a silent bond between them. The platoon watched, stunned, as the truth sank in. Marissa wasn't just a recruit, she was a legacy. The recruits began to clap, a slow, respectful rhythm that grew louder. Haskins and Polk stood silent, their bravado shattered. Brooks dismissed the platoon, but not before meeting Marissa's eyes. "Keep that set up, Private," he said. "It's yours." Marissa stood tall, her rifle in her hands, her uncle at her side. She hadn't sought their respect, but she'd earned it. As the crowd thinned, Haskins approached, his head low. "Good work, Delgado," he mumbled, avoiding her gaze. She nodded, her silence her strength. The range was quiet now, but her victory echoed louder than any shot.